We are back from closed session. We'd like to apologize for the delay. During closed session, the governing board voted unanimously to approve Adrian Lauder to the position of Pupil Services Coordinator effective immediately. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Notice to the public, roll call, we are all present. Notice to the public, persons wishing to speak to agenda items may present their written request at this time. Well, the written request is optional. Those making a written request will be recognized first. Persons wishing to introduce a subject not on the agenda may also present their request at this time. The board president will recognize you for the discussion at the appropriate time. Non-scheduled agenda items will be introduced under Section 9 on the agenda. Speakers may be limited to 5 minutes per topic at the discretion of the board president. Do we have any recognitions of guests and presentations?
Just kind of feel like myself as a little bit of a guest after my absence, but no, we do not have either guests or presentations tonight.
Okay. So any correspondence?
No correspondence either.
Okay. The consent agenda. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I as well. Motion passes. Okay, for our communications, our 3-minute reports, Citizens Oversight Committee.
Good evening, school board members and Superintendent Dolan. Welcome back.
Thanks, Tad.
At the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee last night, I was selected to serve as the chair of this committee for the next year. Gary Riddle will now serve as vice chair. I appreciate the confidence that my fellow committee members have shown in me by offering me this position. And one item that's dear to me, I'm pleased to say that on Tuesday, July 31st at 6:30, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee members will receive their walkthrough visit of the Dixon Middle School with John Calise. The committee also voted to take the opportunity at this time to put out a press release style report about the function of the committee and the progress the school district has made in implementing the school renovation plans. I'm looking forward to the tour, and hopefully this press release style note will raise the profile of the Measure Q activities within the Dixon School District. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee members now have their new dedicated email accounts up and running using the format of firstname.dixoncboc@gmail.com. I have that account information set up on my iPhone, so John or anyone can reach me quickly. Since that information is out there, if any of you have any concerns or want to address me directly, please feel free to use that email. It'll ping me and I'll get back to you immediately. Good progress has also been made on the Dixon Measure Q website. We still have a ways to go. The Citizens Bond Oversight Committee website group is now looking for bugs, both using Internet Explorer and Firefox browsers. Please continue to support the effort to improve the functionality of the website, as it is our public face to the community. Our email addresses are highly visible on the Dixon Measure Q website, so last night the committee established a protocol on how to handle the incoming emails submitted by the public. You know, for an example, if someone's complaining about a broken link on the website, I can send that information to our subcommittee members to address that issue appropriately. The release date for a final report for our first year of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee has been pushed back a few weeks from the first part of September to the end of September. And last night, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee issued you all a formal letter asking you to address some concerns about the first Measure Q performance and financial audit issued at the end of December 2017, and that item will be discussed later tonight. Thank you for the opportunity to serve the school district, the taxpayers of Dixon, and of course our public school students.
Thanks, Tad. Okay, are any employee association reports? Okay.
Good evening, Board President, Board members, Superintendent Dolan. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
So on behalf of the classified employees, we were delighted actually recently to conclude our bargaining over the reopener. Obviously, we're not going to be able to ratify that until school starts, but we expect that to be ratified the first week of school. And we were looking forward to a nice quiet summer, but because of recent changes at both the federal and the state level, we're going to be negotiating some things over the summer, so we look forward to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian.
Thank you. Any parent association reports? Seeing none, moving on to cabinet reports. Assistant Superintendent. Is it nice to be on that side
Oh,
of the
it's so
microphone?
nice. This is where. Good evening, Superintendent Dolan and school board members. Thank you very much. So just a couple quick updates tonight. So we heard back from the county. They do a read of the LCAP that you all approved at the last meeting. Heard back from them that there have been no substantive findings, meaning that that process will move forward. Did kick it back for just a couple of language issues to clean up. Occasional typo in a 250-page document does happen. We've been very busy in Ed Services. It's a lot of purchasing, ordering, delivering of textbooks and other items this time of year. So thanks to our team over there for taking care of that. We're also shoring up our PD plans for next year. We'll talk a little bit about that tonight later. We talk some contracts. And finally, summer school ended a couple weeks ago. You're going to get a full presentation on that either at the next meeting or the following, just as a heads up on what's going on there. But do want to take the opportunity now to formally acknowledge Tanya Labasse for all her efforts to coordinate that, and then to Laura Burnett, who was the principal of the elementary program, and Wes Bessaghini, who ran the high school program. So it was a very successful summer. More to come on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Our CDO.
Good evening. I'll keep it brief today, and in honor of Mark, since he is not here, I want to let you know that during the 17-18 year, we processed 1,177 requisitions to POs. We had 87 canceled, and we still have 43 remaining until we're able to finish closing our year. Thank you very much. Good night.
Okay. Our Director of Special Education.
Yeah, and before Kim begins, I'd like to welcome her aboard on behalf of all of us in Dixon. Kim has been most recently working at the SELPA level, so she knows a good deal about us. We know a little bit about her too, but mostly she knows a good deal about us. Very excited to have someone with her background join us. Having both been a special education teacher and school psychologist adds not too many people have done both roles, and so we're very fortunate to have her expertise and knowledge in both of those, and appreciate the process that was implemented to bring her on board. I think a great choice, and we're happy to introduce you tonight, Kim, for your first 3-minute report. And I will make the apology for Kim before she goes. So a longstanding family reunion is on the books. So after she makes her report, she's hitting the road. About a 4-hour drive, I think, that she has to do tonight. She has one item later that I'm going to cover on her behalf. So,
Okay.
yeah. Kim,
Very
welcome
good.
in.
Welcome.
Fire away.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be part of the Dixon team. It's a great district, so glad to be part of it. I kind of hit the ground with my feet running. I've been trying to make parent contacts, reaching out to our parents, talking to them about starting a local community advisory committee, as well as getting some members that we can send to the SELPA level so that Dixon is represented more at the county level. I've been working on hiring staff, teachers, psychologists, working on previewing some important curriculum, meeting staff members, trying to remember all the names, doing better at that. Also working on sending letters of introduction to the parents so they know who I am and that I am here and here to support them and their students. And just really excited about the upcoming school year and trying to make sure that we are starting out strong and that our positions are covered and our students are receiving all the services at their IEPs. indicate they should receive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kim, and welcome again.
So Mark's not here.
Mr. Monticello is actually ill, of all things. Yeah, so
He has a virus.
I'm not sure what his ailment is, but he
was
came to
funny.
my office kind of mid-morning and said, I don't feel very well. I'm going to go home. And said, so you better stay home tonight, too. So
That was bad.
see him next time out.
That was bad.
Sorry. Good evening, Board. Superintendent Dolan. I'm going to acknowledge Mark, too, and let you know I'm going to apologize in advance, but I think I'm going to take Mark's 3 minutes here. We have a lot going on in facilities and M&O. So to start off, we'll talk about the middle school project across the street, the roofing project, the single ply, which is the flat roof where the HVAC is up in the well. We're at 90% complete, and we are on task. Did a project walk there yesterday. I've been up there every day. I called out about 8 items that I wasn't thrilled with and that didn't actually meet the blueprint specs. So the roofer is actually changing those and modifying that. And we will actually begin the metal roof not this coming Monday, but the following Monday. So as of now, we are on target as far as completion, and that completion date should be 8/20, not including what we would call a punch list. So August 20th, we should see that roof wrapping up. The portables, as you can see, and as we mentioned briefly at the last meeting, all of the portables are gone, and the site is 100% complete, or 100% clean. With that, if you recall, the initial estimates to remove the portables were about $150,000. Those estimates were not only mine, but they were validated by LPA, by Cumming, as well as Cooperative Strategies. I'm happy to report that in spite of the fact that we did find asbestos in them and we had to have it remediated, even with the small change order for that remediation, instead of $150,000, we had that project completed for $54,000. So we saved about $100,000 on that demolition, the way that we handled it. Analytical testing, if you recall, I brought a contract to the board, I believe it was last month, to have a lot of the materials tested for asbestos and lead. The testing, the sampling is all complete. We're waiting on the lab to come back. We are seeing some positive things, unfortunately, some positive test results that we will have to remediate. And that actually leads into the facility hardship program, to talk about that briefly. So spoke with the consultant. They're working on that. Some of the documents that they need to move forward for that, but also to look to see if we're going to qualify for modernization. They've come back to me now to look for those documents because the Office of Public School Construction has lost the documents from the prior modernization back in 2000. So we're trying to find the documents to help them with that. The other pieces that we may qualify for the hardship on really dealt with structural issues and mold. Structural being a lot of dry rot is what we're looking for. When we did the roofing portion of the project, surprisingly to us, we found virtually no dry rot whatsoever on that roof. There were a couple of boards. We still don't know what the underside of the building looks like. We're waiting on the engineers to come out and take a peek at that. The other issue is potentially mold. We haven't had the firm results come in from the lab yet. We know we have some mold in A-wing, and it's showing up as some pretty nasty stuff. It's showing up as that statchy. So we could potentially see some dollars from that, but we don't know what that is yet, so I really don't want to speculate. Moving forward, Prop 39 is still going. That's the energy efficiency work that we're doing. We had all of the units removed from A-wing in order to do the roofing, but right now we're scheduled to actually replace all the HVAC units at the old high school starting August 27th. And with that, we've already completed different lighting projects and various projects under Prop 39. Gretchen Higgins fencing project, the board had approved the schematic design several months ago. As of yesterday, we are DSA approved. So we'll be moving forward. End of August, I anticipate releasing documents to go to bid. The hope is really to have all the prefabrication work done during November and looking to do the construction at the site over the Christmas break. The actual construction should be pretty minimal, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. The work is really going to be in the factory and fabricating and powder coating those fences. RFPs are going out in the end of August for the project inspector of record as well as testing lab for the middle school project. That falls in line with anticipated approved plans for the end of November. Dollar-wise, we are right on the cusp for that project of really needing a construction manager versus not needing a construction manager, even though I'm on that site. There's a lot of paperwork and minutia and everything that's managed through a CM firm. We're on that cusp. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to release an RFQ for CM firms to come in, and we'll put a panel together to interview them. And really, it's just about what can you do for this project? What dollars can you save us? So on and so forth. And then once we hear that and we interview these firms, we'll bring that to the board and make a recommendation as to whether or not we use a construction management firm. Project walk tomorrow with Architectural Nexus for their fee proposal on the Sylvieville projects for the fire life safety. And lastly but not least, obviously, is the farm. Farm is moving forward. The engineers are working on everything on the back end right now. So we anticipate that they need at least another 4 weeks to do what they're doing before I really have a solid update for you. That being said, I've discussed with Mr. Dolan. I will not be at either board meeting in the month of August, but hopefully I should have a good update for you during the month of September. So with that, sorry my 3-minute report went over. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, in charge.
It probably takes 3 minutes to get up here, it feels like. Okay, so we're super busy in human resources right now, specifically with recruiting. So we do have some teacher vacancies that we are working on, both in special ed. We've got one in the elementary setting, and then we have a couple in the secondary setting. So we're working with our principals and on EdJoin and advertising as much as possible. We've got interviews set up here and there next week with for different positions. We also have some classified recruitment that we're doing as well. We're prepping for the activities that open the school year, specifically in HR. We've got the new teacher orientation, which is August 1st. So we're working on prepping that and getting ready to continue our negotiations with CTA and negotiating with SEIU on the effects of the Janus decision. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leonie. And I'd like to begin just by saying I'm really happy to be back. This is my 3rd week for those not keeping score at home or here. And they have been busy weeks. And I think you heard an awful lot about what's going on. It's the typical let's get the year going kinds of things. And I'll give you board members update tomorrow in my weekly update. I just wanted to in the interest of time, not go into a lot of those details, but just to extend some thank yous. I received an awful lot of concern and support as I was out dealing with my health issues. And so to the board, certainly first and foremost, my cabinet team, and I'm not going to single any one of them out, but they rose to the occasion of being without a superintendent spectacularly, in my opinion, and Cicely, my executive secretary, helped keep an awful lot of things together as well. The rest of the admin team, both at the district and site level, really answered every call that was made. I had some really nice and kind, thoughtful outreach and gestures from community members, and received a whole bunch of cards through some staff members from students, and those were particularly endearing and charming. As I said, I will update you via email tomorrow with some of the things that have been going on, but we do have a lot of work ahead of us. Full-day cabinet meeting on Monday, full-day management meeting on Wednesday, kind of the highlights of next week. But I'll fill you in with the rest there, but thank you again.
Thank you. Public comment. Persons wishing to introduce a topic within the subject matter jurisdiction of the district and not on the agenda may do so at this time. By law, subjects not on the agenda cannot be acted upon by the board, except to briefly respond, clarify, or refer to staff for review and presentation at a future meeting. Comments may be limited to 5 minutes per person to a maximum of 25 minutes per topic unless extended by the board president. I do have a comment card, so Ian Arnold.
Good evening again. Thanks for the opportunity to come up and speak. So a couple of weeks ago, we had an unfortunate situation here in Dixon where our vice mayor actually utilized his title as vice mayor and engaged in some homophobic activity in his local column. Nothing that any of us were really surprised or shocked by, because those of us who've read this stuff know it's been going on forever. But this time he sort of just went beyond the pale. So last week in the city council chamber, we heard from dozens of current and former Dixon students who talked, and it was really heartbreaking to hear them talk about just how bullied they were, how folks have left Dixon and are now thinking about coming back to Dixon because maybe this stuff is going to stop. I think it was really a black eye for Dixon that it's taken this long for this behavior to have been noticed. But what some of us are trying to do is try to get the word out there that This is not that kind of a town. We're a much more inclusive community. And to that end, we have these posters that we've had printed up, and we would like to actually donate them to the school district so you can actually post one at each school facility, including the administrative offices. And I've got a couple of extras here just in case anybody has any pull with the library board. Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Are there any other public comments?
Hi, I'm back. I just want to address the elephant in the room, and that is the special ed department. Yes, Julie Kehoe is gone, but the mess is still there. And Mr. Jaramani probably knows that. He took over for Mr. Dolan for that time, that it is a mess, and probably more aware of it than he was before. When I spoke in June, I kind of put Mr. Jaramani on the spot as far as numbers of IEPs, and it turns out it was a conservative number that he gave me when he kind of guesstimated 300. So today I want to talk a little bit about numbers, because numbers don't lie. There's roughly, depends on which website I go to online, anywhere between 32 to 3,500 students roughly in Dixon Unified. And talking with Adrienne Lauder at the end of June, I learned that there are 450 IEPs currently, and that does not include the ones by the county. So if you added, say, roughly another 50, that's 500 kids that are with IEPs here in the district currently. And as of now, since through your LCAP plan, you have decided to split the special ed services and the pupil services. Okay, for me and for many of us, it's semantics. You just split up the job into same two people are doing it. There's no additional help. 500 IEPs is a lot of IEPs to keep track of as far as compliance and quality assurance. There's nobody doing that. You can't expect Kim Parrott to actively keep on top of 500 IEPs. You need to hire more people in that special ed department, people with expertise in special ed. It took Adrienne until the end of June for me to sign off on just parts of the IEP because she does not know how to write an IEP. And she admitted to me that she was not able to go to all the trainings that were necessary. So you need to look at trainings also and getting people in there and getting them trained. I started this summer over the summer a Facebook group for not just parents of special needs students in the school program, but also for any special need parent with a special need individual from 0 to 100. There is a lot of people here in Dixon with special needs that are going unaddressed, and so I felt it was time to start bringing them together, which I know Kim is talking about doing a separate program also. But one of the things that came out of that as addressing it to the community is that a top administrator mentioned to the staff that they are not to refer students for assessment. That's not only morally and ethically wrong, it is against the law. And I would like you to look into that. And I'm not going to name where my sources are because they are worried about retaliation. But I heard it from more than one staff person. That being said, with Julie Kehoe also being gone, you need to look at how to improve the system for transparency. I've looked online. I've spent several hours trying to find reports on where the special ed dollars are going. I find a little line item about salary and aides, and that's about all I can find in the financials. We need accountability. We need to know how much is spent on non-public education tuition, how much is spent on transportation, how much is spent on salaries, how much is spent on durable medical equipment, health equipment, and not just a line item. I mean, basically, the last 5 years, you have, not you in general, but the special ed department has lost the trust of the parents. And Kim's going to have a tough row to hoe. And I've talked with her several times. I've been pretty blunt and to the point about it because I'm too old to sugarcoat. When you know better, you do better. And it's up to us to do better for all these kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I don't have anything written out, so I'm just going to fly by the seat of my pants. I had a daughter in the county program that was at Dixon High School for 6 years. I had 2 sons graduate from Dixon High School. As a parent, I can just say one thing after hearing Ms. Cornish talk. We tout AP courses, honors courses, and for those children that don't want to do college, you have academies. Seems to me that when you come and speak about special education, especially the kids on the spectrum of the more severe, that you're doing us all a favor by even taking them. I heard something last month at the board meeting, and one of that was you have a very high rate of suspension on your special needs student population. I can tell you for a fact, my daughter will be 34 next month, that when these kids opt out of post-secondary at 22, parents are in for a rude awakening, and I bet you as the board don't even know that if you have an aggressive child, they don't have to accept you to an adult day program. They don't have to do it. So I would behoove the board, the superintendent, and the district to work with the county and come up with a better plan than suspending a child with an IEP. If you're not in school, you cannot learn. When you have an IEP and you miss school time, that is really, you're hurting them more than you're helping them. The other thing I'd like to say is I just wish Dixon would surround the special needs population. I know it's sweet and cute to have Team Dixon and the wonderful things they do, but when these children get older, they need to be educated. And these parents come here to have their children educated, however that may look, whether it's going to college later or not. We come here to have our children educated. And we look to the board, we look to the superintendent and the special director of special education. We look to their expertise on how to do that the best way. The best way is not have a student floundering without an IEP for a year. That's not how to do it. And I'm just trying to say this as passionately as I can. Make these parents feel like I felt when my son, both boys, had an opportunity to do AP honors coursework. Or if you don't have a child that can do college, wants to do something else. Our kids are here to learn, and that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Christina.
Have we announced about our special ed committee that we're, I mean, she mentioned it briefly, but Brian, do you want to give just a brief explanation of how parents can get involved more?
Sure. So there, through the SELPA local plan, there's a body called the Community Advisory Committee, the CAC, and it is intended to consist of representatives from all of the districts in the SELPA. And Dixon has traditionally had a hard time filling those spots. but it is intended to be a place where stakeholders can gather and share their concerns, reflect on successes. The role of the CAC is to contribute to decision-making in the SELPA. As sitting on the Council of Soups and chairing it in particular, I've had regular presentations coming from the chairperson of that CAC. So the idea that Kim is rolling with is to create a local CAC, and then hopefully that will feed into the SELPA CAC, just kind of like we have ELACs at the sites and a district DLAC, right? The same kind of idea. So Kim is in the process of drafting an introductory letter to all of the families of students with IEPs in the district, and it's 459, I think, is the number. She will be informing folks of that local CAC opportunity that will be upcoming, extending an invitation to participate. She'll also be offering her contact information and inviting people to come in and speak. She's already had conversations with about 10 or so of our families who are students with particularly sensitive needs, or if we have been in a difficult situation with regards to getting IEPs completed, things of that nature. So that work is going on, and she'll also offer the encouragement, and I hope, Debbie, you can do this maybe through your Facebook group as well, but everyone received a letter with a hard copy of, as I understand it, of a parent survey from the SELPA as they're assisting us with a study, and the information about how they could complete it online. So Kim will also be encouraging people to complete, families to complete that survey opportunity as well. So we anticipate, I did meet with Andrew Ownby, the SELPA director, last Friday to catch up on these matters, and he anticipates that their file reviews and similar compliance kind of testing that they were doing will be completed before probably the middle of next week, I think is what he said. The survey will remain open until July 31st. And so hopefully the second meeting in August, and we'll talk about this, might be the time where we could come and do at least an initial report, or if indications are such that we want to devote more time of it, that we schedule a separate workshop-style meeting and maybe get out of this kind of formal environment and get people sitting around tables perhaps, or things. That's something you and I can talk about how we want to proceed with agendizing once the SELPA's work is done. So, yeah, hope that fills in some of the...
Well, and with that, as those letters come out, I really urge parents to fill out those surveys, because without those surveys filled out, that's the input that I need to be able to look at our program.
Yeah.
And so
the surveys are out. Andrew did not have a lot returned as of last Friday. I'll be checking in with him tomorrow again to kind of get an update. But yes, if you are out there listening or watching, please, and you've received one of those, please do complete it. Yeah.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Okay, are there any other public comments? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to our information, discussion, and action section. Mr. Calise.
Thank you. So good evening. Here tonight to talk about CEQA, and actually Catherine Waugh, the Senior Project Manager of DUDEC, who is the consultant that we were using, is here to give the presentation. She's going to talk about basically what we found. And just to kind of recap, we had done, I think it was back in December, we talked about doing a notice of exemption, and over some community concerns, I know the board had decided to do an assessment, kind of look at an initial assessment and some technical studies, a traffic study. And at this point, that has been completed in spite of that we could have exempted, and Catherine's going to talk a little bit more about that. So with that, I am going to pass it over to her. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here.
Sure. So as John said, I'm Catherine Waugh with DUDEC, and wanted to give you the results of the traffic study analysis that we've done and kind of talk about what the options are for the next steps. So in addition to the traffic analysis, we have done some other technical studies and data analysis. And so as I mentioned, we'll talk about the CEQA requirements and kind of where that leads you. This slide shows the different categories kind of technical studies, the technical data analysis that we've done outside of traffic. So with respect to historic and cultural resources, we've done requested a record search from the Information Center, which maintains reports of prior cultural resource studies that have been done so that we can identify whether there's archaeological sensitivity at the site. We've also done a similar database review for biological resources to identify if there are special status species that the district needs to be aware of before making major changes or proceeding with some of the project components. And then similarly done that type of research with respect to hazardous materials. And this is more to find out of prior releases of hazardous materials that may have occurred in the region that could affect the way that you're able to use the property, not as much in terms of the asbestos and stuff that John was talking about earlier. But the meat of what the community wanted you to look at was the traffic impacts, and so that's what I'm going to focus on right now. So the first thing that we do when we're doing a traffic analysis for any project is to define the study area. And for this project, we looked at the intersections that are most likely to be used by school traffic. So there we go. So this map, and I do have it a few slides later, there's a little bit more zoomed in, so you'll be able to see it a little better. But this just shows you the project site outlined in on the right-hand side of the slide, and I believe there's 12 or 13 intersections that we have evaluated what the existing level of service is, which means how quickly vehicles can move through the intersection, and then what the changes to those levels of service would look like with the project in place. So the next couple of steps that we do in preparing the traffic analysis is to obtain existing traffic counts. We use a traffic counting firm to come out, and they lay down hose strips, and they have people observing the traffic patterns at each intersection. And so we use that data to determine what is the peak hour of traffic at any given intersection. And so we take those measurements for about a 2-hour time span in the morning commute and the afternoon commute, and then find which specific 60-minute increment had the highest level of traffic, and we use that to conduct our traffic impact and calculations. With a school project, we don't look at the 5 p.m. sort of going home from the normal workday commute hour. We look at the period around school dismissal. So those are the analysis periods. And then in terms of the significance criteria, that's the CEQA term that we use for what's the magic line above which an impact becomes significant, or below which it stays less than significant. And a school district is not bound to use the significance criteria of the local land use agency, but that is typically what's done. That's what your community is used to, and so that's what we applied in this instance, was the City of Dixon thresholds that are expressed in general plan policy and in their public works and engineering standards. So then the next step is to estimate the way that the project would generate new traffic and where those trips would be distributed. And so this map kind of gives you a picture of that in terms of how the trips, as they're coming to and leaving the campus, how they would disperse through the community. And these numbers are based on, we got the existing location data for the students that are currently enrolled in the middle school, and then we used some assumptions about the 6th graders that would be brought into the campus. So then once we have all of that data compiled, then we can use that to calculate the changes to intersection operations and determine whether or not those changes would rise to a level of significance or cross that significance criteria threshold. Typically that is when an intersection level of service falls to a level where you're really noticing a lot of congestion. So I just wanted to show the zoomed in the map here. The only intersection where we found a noticeable increase in delay was at 4th and A, and it's specifically for folks that are currently traveling northbound on 4th Street. And it's more pronounced for those who want to make a left turn. But the way that the intersection is configured, there's only one lane there. So if you're a left turner and there's 3 people behind you that wanted to go straight, they're also held up by your inability to find a gap in the traffic. And it was occurring in the AM peak period, so it's at the time when you've got drop-off combined with all of the regular commute traffic. We didn't see that effect in the afternoon. But we also noticed that it was only, I believe, 6 vehicles that are being affected. That's the number of cars that are currently trying to make that movement. And so currently we're reaching out to city staff to determine the appropriate way to lessen that effect. And there are a couple of different options, which it would be better not to go into until the city engineering staff have had a chance to weigh in on that. But they are relatively simple options, and there's a couple of different ways that you can address that effect. I guess I did want to highlight in terms of the one of the key assumptions that we made, I should say, is that we assumed that this middle school and the elementary school would have a 15-minute offset in the start of the school day. And that is critical. If you had them both starting at the same time, you would obviously see a little bit more congestion in this immediate area here.
And we would have that as a minimum. Right? It could actually be substantially even 10 to 15 minutes further apart potentially.
So then that brings me to, I guess I want to go on to the CEQA kind of options, but maybe we should pause here and see if there were any questions specific to the traffic analysis.
Just to be clear, the 4th and A Street, you're talking about what you have is number 11 intersection on this?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Any other board questions? Okay.
Okay. So then the CEQA options at this point, as John mentioned, the district had originally contemplated using a notice of exemption for this project. The CEQA guidelines set out a number of different options or types of exemptions, types of projects that could qualify for an exemption. And the exemption that applies to schools is called minor additions to schools. It allows a school district to increase the capacity, make changes at a campus or increase the capacity at that campus by up to 25% or 10 classrooms, whichever is fewer. So the project clearly fits within that. The capacity operating as a middle school would be less than the capacity that it historically operated at as a high school. So the project fits within that narrow definition. But when you want to use an exemption, you also need to look at the exceptions to the exemptions. The exceptions to the exemption say that you shall not use one if there could be a significant impact due to unusual circumstances. And so the recent case law that has revolved around exemptions has said that unusual circumstances is really the key term that you need to focus in on. You first look and see, are there unusual circumstances that could cause a significant impact? And so in the case of a school project where you could increase capacity by 25% or 10 classrooms, you would most definitely see some increase in congestion in the local streets, especially immediately adjacent to the campus. And so that is supports continued use of a notice of exemption by the district in this case, because it is not an unusual circumstance to see that 6 cars would have a slightly slower commute period or might need to find an alternate route to avoid that slight delay. The other option, though, is to proceed with an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. And so what a negative declaration is a more detailed CEQA document that goes through a number of different topics. And then if you can still conclude that your impacts remain less than significant, then you may use a negative declaration. If you need mitigation measures to make sure that those impacts stay less than significant, then we call it a mitigated negative declaration. So what that entails is a few additional technical studies. We would take a closer look at noise by coming out and doing some noise measurements and talking about how use of the site as a middle school campus could change the noise environment in the immediate vicinity. We would also consult with the Yolo Solano Air Quality Management District to determine whether or not detailed air quality modeling would be necessary. in my opinion, it's not likely to be necessary due to the scope of the project and the fact that this isn't a new subdivision. This is just relocating existing traffic for the most part. But we haven't had that conversation yet. And then we would also, just work with your staff and some of the construction plans just to make sure that the appropriate, what we call best management practices are installed in terms of protecting against erosion and water quality effects. Those are all the kinds of things that the district implements as a standard practice anyway. You're required to by a number of different state laws and local requirements. And so the benefit then of doing an initial study and mitigated negative declaration is it does give you a deeper dive into some of those topics, but it also, I think the key issue would be to allow more opportunity for public input, because the initial study and proposed mitigated neg dec goes out for a 30-day public review period. And so I guess that can bring us to our final slide, which is just the a kind of a rough estimate of the timeline that it would take to proceed with that fuller analysis. Okay. And that's the end of my prepared remarks, but obviously I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there any board questions or comments? What's the difference in cost between what we've done so far and a further study?
I don't have the numbers in front of me. About $35,000.
Okay. Okay.
And so is it your opinion that the notice of exemption does apply to this situation?
That, yes, as a CEQA practitioner, that is my my judgment. I'm not an attorney, though, and so I can't advise you on that.
Okay. And you said that the increased traffic that you estimated would not be an unusual circumstance.
I would not consider it an unusual circumstance. I think that is, that is an area where you could probably have differing interpretations. So, but relative to the types of projects that I've worked on a lot of school projects as well as private development projects. A slight increase in delay for these 6 existing trips is really minor relative to the scope of other types of projects. Certainly, if you were considering a new school, you wouldn't fit under the exemption anyway, but a new school would certainly see much different and much greater impacts.
Okay, but with those, we know where the concerns are, and we are working with the city. We can work with the city to mitigate it, because we don't have any authority to be able to change streets or
Post signs
anything
or
to
sign-
do
yeah.
with anything besides the campus. But you did say that you're working with the city engineer to mitigate those concerns, and then our part is to stagger the start times significantly, so that traffic won't be there. I know
Correct.
that commute is something that I do every day, and it would be so. With that, with working with the city, we will be able to mitigate these concerns that you found in your study.
Correct.
Okay, great.
Could you give an example of an unusual circumstance? Is there something that typically falls in that we could contrast to, some increased traffic?
Sure. So when you're talking, if you have a site that does contain sensitive habitats, such as a unique vegetation community of Valley Oak woodland as an example, or wetlands, and the project would have an effect on those, then that could be considered could be considered an unusual circumstance. Okay. Other ones, I'm thinking of the negatives, the opposite of the situation.
Right.
But it's usually there's a unique characteristic of that site that brings up this, something that you wouldn't see on any other campus.
Okay.
If we were to do the additional sound and air quality studies and determine some potential issues there, what are the standard types of practices to mitigate those?
So in air quality, the types of things most likely, on this project, I would say I'm not expecting that would be possible. I'm really, because of the nature of the project, because you're not increasing the number of traffic trips, You're changing the patterns of trips, but there's not going to be a substantial change in the amount of people driving and the miles that they're driving. And the project doesn't involve a lot of construction. So, but typically there's a lot of different best management practices. Construction is where we would typically see an air quality effect. The noise, it can relate more to how the campus is used in terms of where the children have their recess or outdoor recreation periods, and where how close that is to a neighbor. And occasionally the type of mitigation is to install a sound wall or to redesign and put the basketball court 40 feet the other direction. Just simple things to just kind of make sure that you avoid creating a substantial nuisance to a neighbor.
Which we would probably do as such anyway. One other question I had, where will the students, so I know the old Dixon High campus a little bit, where will they typically have their lunch? In the quad, right?
Yeah,
right.
quad and so you have your multipurpose room, which is really not that well equipped to seat a whole lot of people. You have the small gym in which we're putting in flooring that'll allow for both the recreational use and as an eating facility.
Okay.
And then there will be substantial outside seating as well.
Okay, but all that seating surrounded by buildings, so it kind of traps the
this is an
acoustics.
entirely closed campus, yes, and in particular, that's in the center of campus, so you have both buildings and then some existing trees and shrubs and things like that.
And the sporting fields don't have any homes directly along those field areas, as I recall.
No,
There's streets.
Everything is across. Yeah, everything is across the street. On the A Street side, you face this complex and a little bit of vacant lot, and some homes directly across from A Wing, for example, and then certainly across from it's the old JV baseball and the softball fields, there's a small number of homes directly across from here. On the back end, so along the stadium and the old varsity baseball field, there are homes, all backs of homes on that C Street side. There's no homes that actually face the stadium. It's the rear side of all those homes. Some residents do use that rear side substantially as an entry and exit point for them, but none of them are front yards. And again, quite a bit of foliage around those homes back there.
And currently, there's baseball teams and different teams that when I drive by, I see they're out there
Yes.
practicing, so not much would change.
No.
Okay.
No.
Very good.
No.
Okay. Any other board comments, questions? Okay, so I will open this item up to public comments. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm glad an earlier speaker brought up the subject of transparency. There's absolutely been no transparency in this item tonight. What was online told the public absolutely nothing. Where is the traffic study that we can comment about? Aren't we entitled to see that? It wasn't there. I came early expecting that perhaps it was in your binder in the back. There's nothing more in the binder in the back than there was online. Nothing that tells anyone anything. Absolutely no transparency. And I think what is a major factor that is not being taken into consideration, and it is typically done with CEQA studies, is anticipated future growth and the impact of that. I've heard nothing about that. We have more development going on in the Valley Glen and Brookfield areas. We have anticipated development in the southwest, residential development in the southwest quarter. Where is the analysis of what the impact of that is going to be? Where is that analysis? On A Street, on First Street, where is it? There's nothing here showing the intersection of A Street and South 2nd Street. As if no traffic, school traffic, uses that. The current high school impacts that street, the current high school. I don't think it takes someone with a degree in traffic analysis to realize that when traffic is coming from Valley Glen, Brookfield, or your neighborhood, Country Fair, they're going to be looking for the first opportunity they have to get off of First Street. That's going to be East Walnut Street, East Broadway Street, all connecting to South 2nd Street. Where's the analysis of that? It's non-existent. Non-existent. This is a sham.
Any other public comments? Do we want to bring our CEQA person back up and?
I would say it is a fair point. We don't have the traffic study written. We had gotten through the analysis and gotten to the part of having results, and I had a conversation with John, and we wanted to bring the information to you as quickly as possible.
We appreciate that.
We are still working on the write-up to
great.
package it all up for you. But we did look at cumulative impacts. So what are the traffic effects going to look like as some of this ongoing development builds out? And that is when we found the impact. It wouldn't necessarily occur in what we call the existing plus project condition.
Okay.
So the 6 cars thing you talked about was with future growth, not with the current scope of the project?
Yes, I believe so, and I will double check, and I'll let John know immediately if I'm remembering how it was presented to me. And then in terms of the specific roadways, I don't have the background as to why certain intersections were selected specifically for this project, but we do typically look at the existing traffic volumes at those intersections to decide which ones are more sensitive to change and which ones are, again, based on the trip distribution patterns that we see, which ones are more likely to be affected.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any other public comments on this issue? Okay, so this is an information discussion action. My one suggestion that as I'm thinking about this, that we get the traffic study. I know as far as the CEQA is concerned, most of the things that we've heard from the public are concerning traffic. So as far as moving that CEQA on, I don't know if I want to waste taxpayers' dollars, another $35,000. This is just my opinion, doing things that we're not going to change anyways. The concerns about the lunch area being in the quad area, I can't imagine it's going to be any more noisier than DYB when DYB is there, and that it's surrounded already, retained. As far as the noise and the air quality, there's going to be the same amount of cars that are driving in our city than what are. In my opinion, I think we wait for the traffic study to look at it in details and we can release it to the public. This board is all about transparency, and we do our best to ask questions and ask hard questions from administration. And I think that if we wait for the traffic study, that would be maybe our next step. Is there any agreement?
If I may, estimated time when that would be ready and we could share it out?
I honestly don't. I did not check in with our traffic folks, but
Okay.
I imagine, given how far we are in the process, that it could be done relatively quickly, as in 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay.
Okay, great.
Okay. John, does that have an impact on any way in timing of our project? What's the impact if we do decide today either not to approve this or to go back to the exemption? What's the
Waiting on the traffic study doesn't necessarily have a negative impact on the timing of our project. But what I will say, and I've said this before, is that if we look back, right, we qualified under the exemption. I think the board really went above and beyond as actually doing the initial assessment, doing the traffic study really to make sure that there isn't an issue. That being said, what we've seen here, 4 issues. First off, the intersections that were studied, it's really important to talk about the technical company, the traffic study company that did that. Prior to choosing those intersections, they actually came out. They spent, I believe, 2 days actually monitoring the different intersections in the town. They looked at this on days when high school had 0 period and non-zero period. They looked at our schedules for every single campus, and they took all of that into account. So I say that just so the board can truly make an informed decision on this, but as I stand by my original recommendation back in, I believe it was December or November timeframe, this does qualify for the NOE. I think we definitely see that tonight. To answer your question, I'm sorry I definitely got there the long way, but will it hold us up time frame wise? No. It's just a matter of just prolonging. So.
Okay. So we did go above and beyond than the exemption.
In my opinion, definitely.
And did you say that we were exempt on 5 different?
I would have to look at the numbers, but I believe so.
Okay.
We definitely qualified for more than one of the exemption reasons. And first and foremost is the fact that if you're adding less than 25% or 10 classrooms, I believe it is, at its peak, I believe Dixon High School was serving roughly 1,300 students. We anticipate 750 across the street. 15 of those classrooms have been removed completely. The portables are gone. Plus, we're actually reconfiguring and redemising some of A-Wing, which also affects the number of classrooms on that campus. So in reality, not only have we not added to the impact of it, we've actually significantly reduced it.
Okay. One thing that I find interesting, too, is even though all these homes are being built, we are still having negative enrollment, declining enrollment.
Yeah.
So people are commuting and taking their kids with them where they commute. Of course, we would hope to have more students, but so far it hasn't happened.
It's also cyclical with when people have kids. We're coming out of, I don't know, how long ago was our recession? People have less kids during a recession, so
Right.
we're seeing that forward up, 6 to 10 years.
Right, right.
Just less kids.
Yeah.
Based on what we've heard so far, I would lean towards voting to go with a notice of exemption, but I do want to give the public a chance to see the actual traffic study and discuss that in light of the fact that you don't expect it would cause a delay to do that, so that they can look at it and raise concerns that we can then consider before I make my decision.
Yeah, I think there's nothing here tonight that's raised any alarms for me in terms of needing to see anything additional. I don't think we are going to need to go forward with anything more, but certainly if it's helpful for folks to see the full traffic study, that's fine if it doesn't slow us down any.
Sure. And the only thing that I would add is just keep in mind the traffic study is very technical. What you got here tonight is the executive summary of
Right.
that.
Mhm. Right.
So there's definitely no harm in allowing people to dissect
Right.
that, but what they're going to come to is the
same.
executive summary that Catherine delivered for us this evening.
Yes.
Right.
And we appreciate that. Thank you for being here. Okay.
So we'll just.
So we'll inform you on timing of when the full study is available. I think we can talk about your pleasure if it is that we have an additional presentation on it when it becomes available or not. I'm not sure that is necessary, given. I think that we have the opportunity and ability to publicize that it's available out. And for the people who are here tonight who've expressed an interest in it, we can contact them directly. That's easy to achieve as well. But we'll publicize that it's available, notices in the paper and on our Facebook pages and all those kinds of things, and allow an appropriate amount of time for the community to be able to see it, and then come on back and agendize essentially the same item at some point in the future. My guess is that could be probably first meeting in September would be my guess, especially John's gone for both of our August meetings. So given the timing we heard on the study being available and some time for it to be available to the public, probably that first meeting in September.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, John.
Thanks,
Thank
John.
you. So actually, I'll just stay.
Yeah, we're moving on.
Tried. So the next item is actually a letter from the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. Citizens Bond Oversight Committee had some concerns regarding the financial and performance audit. So with that, I'll turn the mic over to Mr. Gary Riddle, and he's going to read his letter to the board.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Riddle.
Good evening. The board members, good evening.
Good evening.
Better get the glasses on I can see with. Here we are ready for the audit for the current fiscal year that's ending, well, it's just ended, didn't it? And now we're still talking about last year's. The committee was briefed on the Measure Q financial audit on 28 March, and there were items that the committee wanted added to the report. At that meeting, the auditor seemed agreeable to making some changes, and those changes are included in the letter to the audit firm. It's included with the agenda. We had a meeting last night and spoke about, well, we need a letter addressed to the board, so I understand that was same letter, but with the address to the board was emailed to the members last night. So having said that, the attachment, which was included on your agenda, has the items that we addressed. And I'll briefly go through them. And in the financial audit, there was an item under the listed as due from other funds, and we requested that a footnote to be explained. It was $14,344, and a footnote to explain that, the source of that. Turns out this was interest on bond funds that deposited with the county treasurer that were posted to an incorrect account. The other item on the financial report was an item called Other Local Revenues of $45,689. Reading it, I assumed that it was probably the interest. I couldn't figure what other revenue would be of that amount. But still, we felt that it should be footnoted item of that amount shouldn't be left to the reader to wonder what was that other local revenue. On the performance audit, there were two items that were violations of the Ed Code, and the first one was the fact that this committee was not formed until 25 May, and we didn't have our first meeting until 2 days before the end of the fiscal year. And I'll just mention that some school districts have even established their bond oversight committees before their election, but they strongly recommend that they're up and running before the bond issue is passed. And of course, you know, all the major contracts, and other than the construction contracts, were already issued, and the bond money and everything before we even formed. And, you know, we're into the next fiscal year having discussions about bylaws and administrative things that should have been taken care of immediately, but we weren't formed. The other item was a violation regarding the bond, the audit report itself. And it was dated and probably received shortly after 12 December 2017 at the district. I was looking at the school board agenda for 1 February. day or so before, and I saw that on the agenda. So I went to the school district to get the report then, but I really didn't have time to prepare anything to come to the school board meeting. And so consequently, the board approved it without any questions. And so by the time we got it and asked questions, it was too late. So, you know, the board can do what they please. We will include these items in our annual report.
Great.
And I had one other thing I wanted to... we've had some correspondence back and forth, and, well, I sent an email that prompted a letter from the board questioning as to whether the committee was acting beyond their purpose, as well as was I speaking on behalf of the committee. And it's very apparent that there is a disagreement regarding the board's vision of the role of the Bond Oversight Committee and the committee's view. And it is related to, that letter was related to this audit request change. And we can discuss that now. I know your next item has, on the agenda, I think you're going to be expressing some ideas about the Bond Oversight Committee, and if you'd like, I'll come back then and give you our view.
Great.
Okay?
Yeah, I just have a question. I was just wondering, you know, when when I was reading your letter, I was wondering about the part where you talk about the CBO or the CBOC being formed prior to the passage of the bond, but it would have to have been done in conjunction with the school district. Isn't that right?
Well, you're the one that forms the...
No, other districts. You're saying other districts did it prior to the passage of the bond.
Yes.
How could they do that? Because wouldn't that be campaigning? I mean, right? Because you're doing something in an effort to pass the bond by putting together a committee and rallying that committee together to hopefully pass a bond, and that's not legal. How would that happen?
No, it wouldn't be for campaigning. It's to get to be assured that the bond oversight committee is in place early, and so they've been in place a week or two or a month before they didn't have meetings. There was nothing to discuss.
But who could appoint them? Because it's not something that we would.
The board appoints them.
But that has to do with the item that's on the ballot, and I think there's a pretty bright line about the things that you can do as a board with items that are on the ballot.
Well, this district advertised for a architect contract 6 months before the election, roughly. I give my hats off to them for planning ahead, anticipating. They went out for requests for qualifications through their contract. Their contractor did. So I thought that was good planning, and having the Bond Oversight Committee ready to go when the bonds passed. In that interim, before the money was actually, the bond money was, bonds were issued. If the committee was in place, soon after the election, they could have worked on their bylaws, their mission statements, and got to know each other and organize and make plans for subcommittees and things they wanted to do.
It just seems to me you could be pretty easily accused of doing things in support of a ballot initiative if you were an elected board appointing people to a committee prior to the passage of that bond.
Right, because us as a board, we weren't, there were clear guidelines of what we could do as far as campaigning, correct?
Right. Right. Yeah,
Because
that-
we manage tax dollars.
Specified in law. And I have heard of, Gary's right, I have heard of districts where they have appointed their CBOCs prior to the election. It's typically done in an attempt to reassure the voters. I mean, it's kind of to your point, Catlin, I think it's to reassure the voters that those accountability and transparency measures will be in there, but I don't know if it's ever been challenged or not, but I am aware of some instances where that committee has been formed beforehand. Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic.
Mr. Riddle, I think I understood when I read the letter about your guys' concerns, and I think it's absolutely appropriate. You guys do what you want in terms of putting them all in your report. That's why you exist, to do those things. I was curious, and correct me if I'm wrong, you said the auditor was willing to make these changes to the report, to the audit report?
He was receptive to the changes, but since it had already been approved by the board, his position was that we need to go to the board.
Did he feel that they were necessary changes, did he say? Or just something that he could do?
Well, he was not real supportive of he talked about materiality on the changes to the financial statement. And materiality is, again, one of those subjective things. Sometimes the amount of an entry is not as important as it could be an indication of something else. So it's important to know what those amounts that aren't fully described in some way.
Okay. So the changes that the CBOC is requesting, that audit report, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, that audit report set forth that no money was improperly spent, correct? The money was properly spent.
That was the auditor's conclusion.
Okay.
Great.
And you haven't requested a change in that conclusion?
No.
Okay. Did you ask the auditor how much these changes would cost the district to make them in the audit report?
No, I didn't. And he didn't offer that information.
Okay.
He was more concerned about making change to a report that had already been approved.
Okay.
I would like to add that the performance audit, as stated in the audit report, was a compliance audit. And the Ed Code requires the audits to be follow the generally accepted government auditing standards, and that's issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. And the compliance audit objectives under the GAS issued by the Comptroller include compliance criteria established by provisions of law. And these two items are in the Ed Code, which is a law, as you know. And the auditor made the comment that if he knew that the committee was not formed on time, that he would have included that in the audit report, because he understood that even though it wasn't written in the scope, when they agreed to the audit and put it in the scope of audit for the performance, that wasn't specifically mentioned. But he understood that in a compliance audit, they should, if there were any non-compliance with laws, that they should be. And that's all part of the performance. So, I think those, at this point, I think the most important thing is that there's communications and we're not left out of the loop. And I'll just add that the audit letter that came out, the audit memo for the upcoming audit, was addressed to the Bond Oversight Committee. We never received a copy of it. It was addressed to the board and the Bond Oversight Committee. That letter should have come to us. I got a copy of it. It was downloaded because you had it at your, I believe, April meeting. The letter was dated 5 April. And there's important information there, like when the draft report's coming out. That would be the appropriate time for the Bond Oversight Committee to have some input, and at least something, if we have issues, to be considered, not just ignore us and approve the report, and we never know what's going on.
Well, I agree. The district needs to communicate well with you guys and quickly, and I can tell you certainly nothing I would do has any intent to ignore the CBOC. I appreciate what you guys are doing. I will say one of my concerns is that we'd be spending money here for something that you told us yourself the auditor didn't see as really material. I think going forward, we certainly need to make sure that you guys get everything in a timely fashion the way you need to. And I think it was previously on the record that the committee wasn't set up in the 60 days. And I think Mr. Dolan talked about that before. So I don't disagree with what you're saying about good communication. I agree wholeheartedly with you on that.
And Mr. Riddle, I appreciate you being here. I actually was going to, had my plans to come to the last meeting, but I was celebrating my 20th wedding anniversary, so that took precedence over coming to your guys' meeting, so I apologize to that. And I have some more comments, but I wanted to wait until I hear what the auditor has to report, and then I'll share my comments.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Melissa?
Any other public comment? Or do we
Yes,
want
I
to just
should-
double check if there's
Yes.
any other?
Thank you.
No, yeah, absolutely. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, we have Jesse Diol from James Martin and Company to review some of the concerns of the CBOC and to answer any questions you may have. Here's Jesse.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Jesse Deal from James Martin and Company. We're the independent auditors for the district and the Measure Q general obligation bond. And so Melissa's going to put up my PowerPoint presentation. Basically, we received an email from the COC with some concerns. And so what I did is I put together a PowerPoint to address some of those questions. And then if there's any additional questions, I can address those here tonight. Oh, that's okay.
Mark is sick one day, and this is what happens.
With his virus.
Were there handouts? Because I could maybe just go through it, and they could just follow along
No,
with it.
I'm not sure that there were. I don't believe that there were any. Oh, do you? Okay. There we go.
And the PowerPoint is just going to just discuss the role of the board, the role of the COC, then the auditor's role, and then I'm going to reference some ed codes and what the definition of a financial audit is and a performance audit.
So we have it on our iPads.
I think you can get started.
Oh, you
Jesse.
do?
Yeah, we have
Oh,
it.
I was.
We have it up here.
Okay,
Now,
I apologize. I didn't know.
Well, that's
everyone in the chambers has a copy who
Perfect.
needs one immediately. So yeah, go ahead and feel free to get started.
So you
Thank
guys already know the background. We just needed 55% approval to pass the bond, and then once the bond was passed, you have to have accountability measures by forming a citizens oversight committee and then having a financial independent audit on the financial and the performance piece of the general obligation bond. So with Measure Q, there was a Series A that was issued for $19.2 million, and basically it was to repair, renovate, reopen Old Dixon High School as a middle school, and repair and renovate Anderson Elementary, and then there's some ADA compliance expenditures that were going to result from it. And so basically the purpose of the governing board is to appoint the Citizens Oversight Committee, and they're basically supposed to make sure that all the funds, they're supposed to be spent in accordance to the bond text. And then once it appears that 55% of the voters are in favor of the bonds, then they're supposed to basically discuss that and put it in the minutes. And then also when they do that, then they're supposed to communicate with the county and let them know that a bond's passed. And then when the Citizens Oversight Committee is formed, their role is to get formed within 60 days of when it's communicated the results of the measure. Okay, so once that's communicated, then the 60 days starts to the time starts to go.
Can I ask a question really quick?
Yes.
So what happens if you put out if the district puts out, we need these members to join the committee, and nobody comes forward as that, that fits that specific role?
So I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
So one of the interesting things that came about, and it was subsequent to the audit, was the issue that the 60 days had lapsed, and the formation was after the point. Mm-hmm. So we looked at it after the fact, and we said, okay, would this have changed our opinion on the financials?
Okay.
Is this a risk? Is this going to mislead? If we put this in as a finding, is it going to mislead the users of the financials? Are they going to think that the funds have been misappropriated, right? Okay. And that's what I'm going to kind of get to towards the end when I explain what the definitions of a performance audit is. Okay. So we did consider it after the fact, and then I'll tell you what our conclusion was. So the 60 days is from the time that it's been communicated in your minutes, okay? And then you have to have at least 7 members that serve a 2-year, and they can't go for 3 consecutive terms. And so I've put in the ed codes, and they're also in the appendix to this packet. And then the purpose of the COC is just to inform the public concerns of the expenditures and of the bond revenues. So they're just supposed to be actively reviewing the report to ensure that everything is being spent properly, that there are no exceptions, no findings. And so that's their sole purpose, just to act as an oversight, just to ensure everything is spent in accordance to the bond text. So the COC, I can control this from here, right? No? Okay. So they're supposed to convene an oversight, and then, again, it's just to make sure that everything is spent in accordance to the bond text, and then that there are no funds used for administrative or teacher salaries. Okay? And then they can also engage in receiving and reviewing copies of the annual report. So that's the financial and performance audit reports. And I have cited the Constitution section where it states that. And so just to show you, we just kind of summarize your timeline of the meeting minutes. So you can see here on January 12th, that's when your 60 days would have started, because that's when you declare the results and you certify that the election results of November 8th. And so now I'm going to talk about the auditor's responsibilities in regards to the bond financial and performance audits. And so the audits are, they're supposed to be in accordance with the audit standards set forth by the government audit standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States of America. And we have the provisions in the appendices of the audit guide that specify the objectives and the procedures that we're supposed to perform when we do the financial audit and the performance audit. And I have that as one of the last pages, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what I did is I took the text out of there and I put it in here. So as far as the financial audit procedures, we're supposed to determine that the bond fund financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects. It shows the financial position of the fund for the year ended and the results of the operations for the year ended, and that they were in conformance with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. And then we're supposed to test the internal controls of the district to ensure that there are proper controls over the bond proceeds as well. So there's segregation of duties, so there's checks and balances basically. And if there's any deficiencies in the controls, then we're supposed to communicate those. So in our internal control letter that's included in one of the appendices, you can see that there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in the district's the internal control environment. So the internal control piece, we're not supposed to be issuing an opinion. We're just supposed to let you know if there's any deficiencies. As far as the financial audit piece, we are supposed to ensure that they're free of material misstatement, and we concluded that the financials were presented fairly in all material respects. Moving on to the performance piece. So the performance audit, we're supposed to do a representative sample of expenditures, and we're supposed to ensure that they are applicable to the ballot measure. So that's the first part. So ensure that every expenditure that we're testing that captures a representative sample, that they conform with the ballot measure. Then the next thing is if there's any salaries that are paid from the bond proceeds, that they're only used in conjunction with the bond projects themselves. Okay, so as of June 30th, 2017, there were no salaries paid from the bond proceeds. So we didn't have that statement in our performance audit when we had the procedures that we performed and opined on. So, and that's all there is for the performance audit. It's just, did the expenditures meet the ballot language? That's it. It doesn't specify if there's a 60-day period that it was lapsed. So that's the reason why we didn't feel that we needed to go back and reissue or just reissue our report, change it in any way. If we had, it would have misled, I think, the readers, the users of the financials. And I referenced to the opinion from the California Attorney General on how salaries are able to be approved for usage from the bond measure. And so basically, if there were any issues where the bond proceeds were not spent in accordance with the ballot text, then there would have been a performance finding. And so we concluded that there were no findings. And so the question that we were sent Next slide. From the COC was, does a finding need to be reported in the report of the district financials and performance audit regarding the failure to establish the Citizens Oversight Committee within the required time frame? So again, we looked at it and we concluded that it wouldn't be a finding. We would have a discussion, and at that time we weren't aware that that didn't occur. So we would have had a discussion with management to see, why is that didn't occur. But it didn't impact the financials. There wouldn't be a material weakness or internal control issue from it. So that's the reason why we opined with an unmodified opinion, which is a clean opinion on the bond performance and the financial audit piece. And so the next. So this is our rationale that we used. So according to the audit guide that we used, the 60-day didn't have anything to do with internal control. As far as the performance audit, it didn't have anything to do with the expenditures. And so the delay of the COC was not material to financial statements, so it didn't warrant a finding. The next question that was proposed to us was, may a school district use the proceeds to pay salaries? And so as I mentioned earlier, it has to be directly related to the bond projects. And since last year there weren't any salaries paid, we didn't have to go down that road. But this year, I believe there are salaries being paid. And so part of our procedures is to test that. So we're still in the middle of the 17-18 fiscal year audit. Once the district closes their books and sends us the financials, we're going to start testing those to ensure that there's full compliance, that those salaries are related to the bond projects. So on this slide here, I referenced to where it says that you are allowed to use the bond proceeds for salaries, but again, it has to be in relation to the oversight work on construction projects. And so just wanted to conclude. So the financial audit of the district measure, it resulted in an unmodified opinion. That means it's a clean opinion. So we didn't express an opinion on the effectiveness of the internal control, but we did state that there were no significant deficiencies or material weaknesses noted during the audit. And the objective of the performance audit was to determine if there was reasonable assurance that the proceeds were spent with the bond language, and we concluded that they were. And so that is basically the gist of it. And then these attachments are just showing you the authoritative guidance that shows the board's role, the oversight committee's role, the auditor's role. The audit guide is the second to the last pages. So it shows the report components of the performance audit. It shows the financial audit procedures, shows the performance audit procedures, which I discussed earlier, and then we highlighted in there, in those attachments, the key elements that you guys want to take away, just for clarity. Any questions?
Any board questions or comments? No. Okay.
And one more thing I wanted to mention. There were some other questions that were raised. I think it's Mr.
Riddle.
Mr. Riddle.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so as far as my comment that we were willing to add additional disclosures, so if management feels, the board feels that these additional footnotes would be beneficial, I have no objection to it because it's management's financials. They're responsible for the financials. We're the auditor, so our role in this is to audit the financials and make sure that they're in compliance. So if having an extra due to, due from, or other local revenues being explained, that wouldn't change our opinion. So you guys can add more language if you want. Our standpoint is we have to look at it as materiality, the risk of material misstatement. So if something is very immaterial, then we wouldn't. It's not going to be. We don't need added, disclosures for that. So that was one thing that I wanted to make sure I covered. I think that's it. When we look at it, we look at the risk. We do a risk assessment of the entity and then the actual fund. And so we go down that process, and we want to make sure we cover anything that would sway your opinion as the financial user. So if it wouldn't mislead you, that's the whole point of it. We want to make sure that it's transparent and we cover, everything that would steer you one way or the other.
Okay.
So that's all I had.
Thank you.
I'll leave it up to anyone else's questions.
Okay. Well, I will make my comments now that I understand this even better. First, I want to say that I really appreciate the time that the committee, the oversight committee, takes to volunteer their time to serve our community. Service to me and serving our community is very important. All of us work really hard and volunteer our time as well to serve our community and to be good stewards of our taxpayers' money. I'm a taxpayer as well, and I want to make sure that my money is not being wasted. It seems to me that changing the audit now with there being no findings would be a waste of taxpayers' money. However, with that being said, going forward, if there are revenues, such as interest revenues, if everyone else agrees with this, make those notes in that going forward, because that wouldn't cost us any more money, if I understand, going forward. But if we have to redo an audit, it's going to cost the taxpayers money. And I don't feel like being a steward of taxpayers' money that is a wise choice.
Just out of curiosity, how much would it be to amend it to add those items?
So I can't tell you that figure because it wouldn't just be my time, it'd be the partner's time to go and review to ensure that I didn't make a mistake. So it can be costly. So I wouldn't recommend it because, like I said, it wasn't material. But going forward, definitely, if you guys feel that you want to add that, we can add that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I appreciated the emails last night when I got home. I read them and from Tad that it came from you, and I appreciate your time. In his email with this letter attached, it said, the district's made some errors, and so is the committee. And I don't think it's a productive use of our time to keep pointing fingers. I think that the district has acknowledged publicly in a public meeting that the committee was not formed at a proper time. I think if we just keep pointing fingers and fighting against each other, it's hindering the work that we're all trying to move forward. I appreciate the thought that you brought to my attention and our attention that you didn't get the audit at the same time as us. And going forward, I can assure you, if you were okay with that we will make sure that you receive it at the same time as we do. That those little footnotes are added to the audit, so in a fashion that's not going to cost us extra money and the taxpayers extra money. And hopefully that can satisfy us having a productive working relationship. I know I'm going to try to attend some of those meetings as much as possible going forward. As I move around my 4 children's busy schedules to be able to give up some more time. And so hopefully with those ideas on the table, we can move forward and continue to work together in a positive manner. Are there any public comments?
So, Melissa, thank you for reading that email probably late last night. But stated in the CBOC's letter, I think we have received a proper acknowledgement of the issues regarding the audit report, and we only ask for things to be changed if it was feasible. And I don't want to spend extra taxpayer money. The main point of this was going forward, and I think you adequately addressed that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, Ted.
Any other public comments? Okay. So moving forward, on our current audit that we're going to be working on soon, we will make sure that those interest revenues are just subnoted, that now we understand that any performance audits is just, the only way you would put a finding in it is if it changed the financials of the audit, correct?
So for the performance piece, it's if the expenditures were not in accordance with the ballot
Okay.
measure.
Okay.
That's how that works. And then same thing with the salaries.
Okay.
They have to be in accordance with the bond projects.
Which we will have to deal with this next audit.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the performance piece.
Okay, thank you. And I think we will again, at our public meeting again, on record, acknowledge that yes, the committee was not put forth in the 60 days. I know that there was great effort that was made. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, and now we have had a committee for quite some time. There's been lots of meetings, and I think we can be productive, hopefully, going forward.
That just made me think, if I may ask you, Tad, with you taking the chair, has someone left the committee, and are we now in need of finding another member, or is it just a shift of roles?
Based on our bylaws, after 1 year, we have new elections for the chair and vice chair. So
okay.
it's just our 1 year was up. We
Okay.
had new elections. Robert Strong had a lot of work commitments, so he was no longer interested in running for those two top offices.
Got it.
But he's still on our committee.
Okay, so no vacancy.
No
Thank you
vacancies.
for confirming that. Thank you.
Again, before we move on, I just want to thank you all for your time and your effort that you put forth into serving our community.
Thank you.
Okay, without any other public comments, we will move on to Mr. Calise again.
Okay, so next item is we had a request from the board to talk about really an energy and utility checkup, just to sort of see where the district is, see what we're saving as far as those taxpayer dollars, what have we achieved so far with our efforts, and what else can we do. So the discussion points for tonight are really around energy and utility usage. Utility consumption is our district goals. What have we done to date? How much have we saved? How much more can we expect to save? What else is planned and what else can be considered? I know it's a long night, but what I will tell you is what we're going to show you here tonight is definitely positive. So with that, district goals, our goals looking at this from the time I first came on with the district and really started talking about this was about reducing our consumption, reducing costs, being good stewards of the environment as well as financial stewards, and good stewards of the environment again. Sorry, I'm talking over myself here. So efficiency efforts to date, we installed solar generating PV systems district-wide. We had the one system that was put in at the new high school when that was built, but we had it nowhere else. So we have it now at almost all of our campuses. We used Prop 39. We did a bunch of lighting projects at the new high school, at the middle school project. We actually used those Prop 39 dollars to offset our bond costs, and we're taking care of most of the HVAC at the DMS project. We're recommissioning the energy management system for Gretchen Higgins, which hasn't worked in quite some time. And then we're also doing a resource advisor, which allows us to really track trends and everything else to just look for any ways that we can cut costs, whether it be on a utility such as water or gas or electric, but even on things such as garbage and collection points, and how can we reduce those costs. So we've also done a lot of internal projects with our own internal capacity, right? We've done an exterior lighting project at Gretchen Higgins. We've done all the interior lighting at the district office, which I'll show you later has actually saved us a great deal of money. We've really, with the addition of having an HVAC person on staff, we're able to address preventative maintenance on our HVAC equipment, which is not only saving us money on our utility bill, but it's also prolonging the life of the equipment. And we're under contract for the well development at Dixon High School, and we're going to talk about that as well. So real quick, just to kind of give you some very big numbers here, we have solar in place now and commissioned for 7 months. So I looked at a few sites, and then I'm going to go to district-wide. But what you see there is a cost comparison between last year and this year for just 7 months, which is how long the systems have been online. So if we look at FY18, which is the year we're coming out of, for the last 7 months at Gretchen Higgins, if we add our solar and our PG&E costs, we're at $31,000. The FY17 cost to that was actually $79,000 for those 7 months. So while we save that, what we also look at on the far right is total savings based on PG&E FY18 rate. So what that means is if we had absolutely no solar and we were still paying that PG&E rate, we would have paid an additional $40,000 on top of that 31 that's there. Same thing when we look at, I'm sorry, I skipped one, C.A. Jacobs. C.A. Jacobs, a little bit different the way the system is configured, but for FY18, solar and PG&E has cost us $18,000, whereas last year during that same time frame it cost us $48,000. So district-wide, I looked at the 7 months, which is really how long we've been commissioned. And what the blue is indicative of is really what we projected when we brought this to you back in December of, I think it was 2014 or 2015 when we first started working on this. And what we looked at was the initial annual savings was supposed to be $88,000. I'm happy to tell you that based on some factors that I'll talk about, but what we're actually seeing and what we've seen happen with PG&E rates, after 7 months, we've saved $127,000. So we've almost doubled our initial annual projection in a 7-month time frame. So based on that, we're actually producing or saving at a 221% above of what we initially projected. Our initial projections for the 20-year power purchase agreement would be that the district would save $3.75 million. Right now, we are on track to save $8.3 million over 20 years with this implementation at 5 sites. So this was definitely a positive thing. So why are we seeing this? Well, first off, the solar is producing at a much higher capacity than we ever could have expected. There's a lot of factors that play into that: temperature, weather conditions, the actual angle that they were able to install them at and still meet requirements as far as fire department clearances, etc. And then there's also, when we did the estimating, we did it based on some conservative rates of what we expected the utility to go up, and we've seen some differences there. So, let me move to the next. Sorry. So what can we expect to save continue? So Prop 39 projects, we are doing the HVAC, the exterior lighting, the quad lighting. If we factor all of these things, just for Prop 39, we gave Schneider Electric a contract for $867,000 to do these projects for us. We had grant money for $799,000. So ultimately, the district has to come out of pocket as $67,000. Now, we had said when we passed the Prop 39 that $67,000 would come out of the Measure Q funds, because that's actually being applied to the HVAC for the Dixon Middle School. It's important to note, though, that based on the savings that we're seeing, our return on investment on this is under 2 years. So in 1.85 years, when that school is operational, we'll actually have saved all that money and gotten it back. Additionally, what we haven't seen the savings from yet, or we haven't determined what they actually are, we're seeing the savings already, would be so the recommissioning of the energy management system at Gretchen Higgins. We see some of the savings just by that broad spectrum that we see in cost is what we spent last year versus this year. But the next thing that I'm going to cover tonight is going to be actually talking about energy set points. So we'll see a greater savings with that. We haven't necessarily determined just by monitoring trends and really monitoring our consumption and what we can do, the benefit of that resource advisor, and additionally, same thing, the preventative maintenance on the HVAC. I can make some short-term projections as to what we're saving from that, but ideally you really want to look at that over about a 5-year period when you consider the fact that you are prolonging the life of the equipment by actually maintaining it. So those savings have really yet to be determined, but they obviously add to what we're already saving as a district. So I threw this little chart together because I thought this was pretty cool to see. When we looked at our internal projects, I looked at the lighting for Gretchen Higgins that's completed and the lighting for the district office. And what I put up here is just a different series of bulbs, that series of progression that we've seen over the years, from the incandescent bulbs to the T12s to those awful CFLs that didn't light up anything, to now we're in that LED technology. These numbers are based on 25,000 hours, which is an average of 10 years. If you look back to the incandescent bulb, to run one single bulb for those hours and actually replace the bulbs as needed, you were at a cost of $312. Similarly, the T12s that we had in the district office before, over that time period, we were at $200. We're currently now using LED technology, and the cost to run those bulbs as well as replace them over that 10 years is $58. So if we add up our hours and we figure that we're actually hitting those 25,000 hours of use over an 8-year period for the district office, to run the T8s, which are actually a little bit more efficient than the T12s, it would have cost us $114,000 for 8 years. To run the LEDs over that time frame will be $25,000. The cost of those fixtures, what we outlaid, was $11,000. So we have an 8-year savings right off the bat of $80,000. It's also important to note that what's not included in here, and I just realized this, is actually the rebate that we received from PG&E to buying those. And the rebate was actually offset almost 50% of our cost of fixtures on that. So I did just realize I didn't note that. Now, these savings here is based on the much higher rate than what we pay. So we pay, when we look at our solar, we average about 16 cents per kilowatt. This is PG&E. And the reason that it's based on that is we do not have solar at the district office. The solar at the district office in that parking lot, the parking lot is the city's. As you know, the city owns the solar. We reap zero benefits of that. So we're paying full price. And unfortunately, we're in that time of use meter where we're paying the premium during the day at the district office. So future plan projects, a big one that's definitely on the radar for this board is the ag well out at the high school. So first, I'd say that we've gotten our cost down to $104,000 a year to run that ag well. It used to be significantly higher, but by basically being much more proactive and reacting to these major leaks that we continue to have, by changing watering patterns and watering times, we've been able to reduce that bill significantly. Now, the city has not yet passed the major chart changes that they're going to do with the water, but from talking to engineering, they're talking about some rate increases of 100% per year for 2 years and then 20% per year for 5 years. So and that's mainly because the city needs to replace all of their infrastructure and wells, is what they've told me. So if we factor that $104,000 that we spent this last year, at the end of FY25 will be over $1 million just to irrigate the campus at Dixon High School. So getting this well online is really, really important, not only for the future development of the farm, but just for the continued operation, particularly to athletics. So if we consider the fact, worst case scenario really of a well development, once we do the development, but the actual construction and completion of that well to get it online, if we factor that cost to be around $225,000, we still see a savings of $3.7 million right there. Excuse me. So future project considerations. First one, net metering agreement for C.A. Jacobs in the district office. That's something that I've been working on for a while. It is a huge process with PG&E. But if you look, we have solar at the Dixon Middle School project on C Street. We have a net metering agreement in place that solar not only feeds the Dixon Middle School project, but it also feeds Anderson. That was an easy agreement to come to because of the proximity. It was across the street. It was on the same power grid. What we're trying to put into place is that same agreement between C.A. Jacobs and the district office. And we're trying to do that for several reasons, first of which is obvious reason. During the summer when C.A. Jacobs isn't in effect, the district office still is. But the second is if you all remember when we talked about the power purchase agreements, regardless of whether or not we use the energy that we produce, we have to buy from the solar company. So it's really important to consider that when we think about the construction timelines and everything else. There will be times when C.A. Jacobs campus, because it's going to be used as that stopover, could very well be sitting empty. The last thing that we want to do is be paying for energy that we're not using. If we can transfer it across town, even if we wind up losing a cent or two per kilowatt hour, we're still definitely way ahead and we're not throwing money out the door. Battery storage solutions is another big one that I'm looking at. I'm talking to Schneider, but also 2 other energy firms about it, because battery storage is really good in the sense of when you're producing the most energy, when the sun is at the hottest, school is out, right? Not only during the summer, but even just during the day, it's after 3 o'clock, 5 o'clock, hottest time of the day around here. So what battery storage solutions would allow us to do is actually store that energy and distribute that energy during the day when we're not necessarily producing as much. So it just, what that does is that we're still buying the same amount of energy from the solar provider, but we're buying less energy from PG&E that way. JPA for electricity, we belong to Spur, which is a joint power. That's how we buy our gas. Spur has gotten into the market for electricity, but they are regulated as to how much they can sell. So we're in line to hopefully become a part of that, but there are some other initiatives or some other JPAs that we may be able to join. Stay tuned on that one is all I would say, because I don't have too much information yet. HVA set points for district standards, I'm going to talk about that next. And then energy efficient window upgrades, energy efficient HVAC upgrades. These are big, big ticket items, right? These are wish list items, but these are things that really, from a facilities perspective, at some point in time, we will begin to need to upgrade. So when we do that, we just want to make sure that we're looking at everything, including the efficiency ratings on them. Interior lighting, we've seen the benefits of that, as well as exterior lighting. Metered restroom fixtures, really where the water turns off on its own. We have that at some of our campuses, but not all. And with what water costs, we definitely want to get those installed. Waterless fixtures, those are a thing that we are seeing right now more and more in public restrooms. Artificial turf, again, big ticket item, probably a wish list item, but it's something that there may come a point in time when we have to consider what is the actual savings and what is the benefit of that. And then the last one, and these are just some ideas, would be hardscaping and drought-tolerant solutions. Drought-tolerant solutions are a little bit easier than hardscaping. Hardscaping typically involves lots of rocks, not necessarily something that we want to put on all of the campuses, but it's something that we can look at. So with that, that is our energy checkup in a nutshell. So I would be happy to entertain any questions.
John, I asked for this item, and I just want to thank you and your team and everything that you're doing on this. This is really quality stuff. So
it really is,
the district and the people, the community, I wish people were here to really listen to it. But that really talks to a lot of really quick turnaround on ROIs and really reducing our footprint really on cost. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you bringing this to us so quickly as well.
Thank you.
And our children's children, thank you.
Yeah, exactly.
Ditto. Thank you, John.
Yeah, really a good news item.
Okay, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you, John.
Are there any public comments on this?
Yeah, I want to direct 2 questions to John. One, is it possible to do some sort of public press release or news summary or something so the public is aware of this? And 2, with all these fantastic savings you've captured, is that savings money budget to anything specific, or is it just going to general funds?
So the press release, I think it's definitely something that we could work on. I would want to work on that with Mr. Dolan. But I think we should look at possibly trying to get this message out there. We're trying to be a little bit more proactive. I mean, even with the silly little video that I put out, right? But it's trying to put that video out, get the message out to people to let them know what's going on. So Tad, thank you for that. Your second question, as far as how it's budgeted, these are what you're seeing here, like the $3.5 million to the $8 million. These are some long-term savings. So I don't know that it's necessarily earmarked, and those savings are against money that hasn't been charged yet. So I don't think, now we do see some savings, right, for like this year alone, but what we're also trying to offset is the constant rise that we're seeing in other utilities. So while we saved all this money in PG&E, for example, this year we actually had to add some money to water, and we had to add other things where we didn't necessarily have that savings. So personally, I would love to see it all go to facilities projects, but I think it just has to go to, right now, just our operational costs. So.
Yeah, Stirs and Purrs may have something to say about
absolutely.
where these dollars go. And actually, John, I haven't had a chance to catch up with you on it, but Melissa and I have been talking about kind of a monthly facilities-related newsletter, especially as we get into the Measure Q projects. And so, Tad, I think your question about how will we publish, this is good news that we need to get out there for certain, and in a variety of ways and consistently. So we'll sit down next week. Well, you're not here next week. You get to go to camp.
Yes.
So we will sit down as soon as we have the opportunity and talk about how to make that happen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yep.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for all your hard work.
Thank you.
You're still up?
Yes, you are.
Yes, I am. So the next one, and again, I apologize. I realize how long of an evening this is, but this was the perfect, the presentation that I just gave you was really the perfect segue to talk about this. And what this is really asking the board to adopt some thermal set points, meaning for our HVAC. And we asked for the board to do this because I will tell you, quite frankly, some classrooms and some schools are worse than others, but this is something that has gotten a little bit out of control. Constantly, we walk the campuses and we see HVAC air conditioning running and doors are propped open. We see teachers trying to drop it to 64 degrees, not just teachers, staff members, etc. So we really need to adopt some set points, not only, again, to prolong the life of that equipment, but to really control our costs. So I'm going to give you a lot of information here, and this information is actually based on 75 years of research from the Association of Engineers that are responsible for heating and ventilation and so on and so forth. So the benefits of this would be obviously reduced energy costs, but there's also studies that I'm going to talk about here that if we can adopt these set points, what these benefits would actually be not only a reduction in energy costs, but improvement in student performance, improved health of students and staff, improved attendance, financial stewardship, and obviously being good stewards of the environment. So looking at our utility costs, this was FY16, and if we look on the bottom there and we look at, I'm sorry, I'm going to go to my copy because I'm having a hard time seeing that. If we look at just PG&E and Honeywell, which is the solar out at the high school, for FY16, we spent right about $700,000. All the other utilities are listed there, but as you can see, they're actually very small pieces of the pie in comparison to those two. If we flip over to FY17, what we see is, or excuse me, this should be FY18. I apologize, it's actually a typo. What we see was PG&E and Honeywell still obviously the biggest consumers of energy, and a little bit more at about $730,000, give or take. So our total utility cost for last year was $1.15 million. So that's a huge chunk of our operating budget. That breakdown of utility cost, we're talking about our HVAC tonight, so it really deals just strictly with electricity and natural gas. When we break that out, 8% of that goes to water heating, 31% goes to lighting, 9% goes to other, which is computers, copiers, miscellaneous electrical items that we're running. But 52% of our cost is going directly to HVAC. So for last year, we spent $410,000 just heating and cooling our occupied spaces. So when we consider the reduction in energy costs, I mean, really, the Department of Energy and Energy Star said it best, and that's that simple behavioral and operational measures, we can reduce these energy costs by 25%. Now, what I'm proposing tonight, unfortunately, does not give us 25%. That's a much bigger thing, but it does get us there, and it gets us on the way. So again, everything that we're going to talk about tonight is based on the ASHRA standard, and what that is that's the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. They are the standard. So across the country, pretty much every governing agency, whether you talk about city, county, state, and federal agencies, they go back to this, and they go to the ASHRA standard to not only create and adopt their own policies, but to really regulate how they push out things. In California, the big one is Title 24, which is the energy usage and consumption, which deals specifically even with how new construction is built. Title 24 is completely based on the ASHRA 55. Furthermore, and I put this in here because it's important to talk about, When I've had some conversations about this already, what I hear is, well, you're not taking into account that in California it's 105 degrees. And maybe you're taking into account that California winters, but it's significantly warmer in Southern California than it is here. What I will tell you is the ASHRAE standard is a very, very thick book, and it is based on all of that. They look at environmental factors, they look at radiant, they look at thermal radiation as far as body heat, they look at humidity and airspeed, and then they also include personal factors, exercise, what are you doing, what have you done, type of clothing. So I want to be very clear in making sure the board understands that what I'm asking you to adopt is based on solid research and not just a little bit of research here. So sorry I didn't give you that slide, I apologize. So ultimately this is what we're asking for. So for cooling temperature, we're asking for thermostats to be controlled between 72 and 76 degrees, while with an unoccupied temperature of 95. And then heating, we're asking for 66 to 70. It is very important to note that if we came out as very, very aggressive and followed the ASHRAE standard, the cooling would actually be warmer and the heating would actually be a little bit cooler. But we do take into consideration the fact that these are schools, these are students, and while ASHRAE considers that, the last thing we want to do is make a major, major change to the classrooms that is going to have an impact just because of what people are used to. So we tried to find that happy medium. So these set points, they align with the ASHRAE 55. Again, they're not necessarily as aggressive as what ASHRAE says, but they align with it. They're also the recommended set points by Schneider. Schneider is our energy partner. They're doing our Prop 39 work, and they completely align with other districts up and down the state. So we're not going to be the one district that's doing this while everybody else isn't. Savings. This is really important to note. So when it comes to cooling, for every degree that we drop below 72, we see an increase in energy usage by 1 to 3%. Same thing with heating. Everything we go over 70, we see as much as 1 to 3%. So if we consider the fact that we can touch every thermostat in the district and adjust it by 3 to 4%, based on what we're paying for solar, we have an immediate savings of about $50,000 per year. Student performance, I talked about this a little bit besides for the financial piece. Studies were conducted by Energy Star. They've been used and cited by the EPA as well as Department of Energy at the federal and state level. What they've said is that improving energy efficiency, specifically HVAC, can have an indirect benefit on improved acoustic comfort. Well, that's sort of a no-brainer. You're not listening to the air conditioner running. But then also what they've shown is that those energy programs, which include systematic environmental conditions, have been in place where improved test scores have been seen. Now, they're not suggesting that they're the reason for it, but they are suggesting that they may have been a factor in playing into those improved test scores. Student and staff health, indoor air quality. Carnegie Mellon, the university, did conduct this study, and what they talked about was reduced infiltration of air contaminants from outside being run through the HVAC units resulted in an improvement in overall air quality by as much as 40%. That's a mouthful. But ultimately what that comes down to is if we're running the air conditioner less, we're actually improving the air quality. Now, a lot of people would say, that's crazy, you're nuts, you're telling me the air outside is worse than the air inside. Actually, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Mr. Dolan can attest to the fact that we did some air quality testing several years ago at one of the campuses where there was a complaint, and what the air quality testing revealed was that the mold and the contaminants and the carcinogens in the air outside was more than twice as bad as what we were seeing in the portables. So what we're ultimately trying to do is keep that bad air outside. Additionally, the filters lasted longer. They served a greater purpose between routine maintenance. If you have the door open and you're running the air conditioner, you're pulling in all the garbage and those filters break down, maintenance is limited with how fast they're going to change them. And with that, then you just start pushing dirt around through the air. Improved attendance, another analysis. This was done for the state of Washington, but what they said was where there were energy efficiencies and green building measures put into place, they've seen absenteeism reduced by as much as 15%. Again, obviously not the only reason. There were other factors, but they do attribute some of that to improved air quality, improved health, and then student and staff comfort. Financial stewardship, there's a lot there. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to point out the one thing that's in bold. This is the one thing that I can ever come to you and ask the board to consider that will save this district money that has absolutely zero financial impact on the classroom. We're not taking any dollars away from the classroom. We're changing the temperature, we're adopting a standard, and we're making a difference by doing it. And then we consider the environmental stewardship, right? We all have that responsibility. So we consider the greenhouse gases. These are created by the burning of fossil fuels that we do to create electricity. With that, 40% of the nation's CO2 and 67% of the nation's SO2, right? These emissions are the primary problems with the smog that we face in this valley. That smog plays into our health and everything else, and us maybe doing the little bit that we can do to help will possibly help that. I hope that makes sense. Sorry, I'm starting to get a little tired. So with that, same thing. I will ask if anybody has any questions, and I thank you for indulging me on that.
When you said in one of the slides the unoccupied set points, what times during the week and how does that work in terms of?
So what's recommended is really that it comes on 1 hour prior to, let me rephrase, is that it should come to temperature 1 hour prior to the start of school, and that it turns off 1 hour after the end of school. Now, I appreciate the fact that our teachers do work and they work late, so what we would do is where we can, meaning like at the high school and at Gretchen Higgins, where we have the energy management system in place, we would have it set up that they can hit the button for a 1 hour override. Where we don't have those systems in place, we are looking at some different thermostats to possibly change district-wide so we get a little bit better control, but even if not, we just do some programming and we try to work with the teachers. I do not suggest that we run this for several hours. I understand that some teachers do want to stay in their classrooms for hours and hours, and I appreciate that. But we have a responsibility to definitely get those units turned off as quick as we can. So what I would suggest is really no later than 5 p.m., obviously keeping in mind that we do have parent-teacher night and play night and things like that.
Well, that was one of my questions, too, for those kind of special situations. Are the site principals going to have the ability to override this, or do they have to contact you to do that?
It's done through my office because, like, where we do have the energy management system at Gretchen and Dixon High, there's been some extensive training courses that we've gone through, myself and Chris, and I'll tell you, I know enough to be dangerous, right? If you're not in this system every day, it gets very confusing and it's really, really easy to wipe out the program. So it's better if it goes through our office and we're able to do that. Now, we've done that, and this has been a work in progress, but like one of the things that we've done even with that is by taking all of the facility use in-house and taking that away from the sites, we've controlled who's in our facilities. Well, we've taken it to the next step, and we've made sure to tell them, look, if you're going to have that parent-teacher night or you're going to have a play, you need to communicate that to us so that we can override your HVAC system and make sure there's cooling. And we've had instances where I've been contacted by Mr. Gabby or other board members saying, hey, there's no air conditioning in here. And it's like, wow, I'm sorry. I didn't know anybody was going to be in there. So that's just a matter of communication between the sites, the site administrators, and my office.
So how does that work? Is there a form that they fill out?
Typically, it's done through email. So we do have some forms for facility use, but when it's internal, it's always been just through an email.
Okay.
And is someone other than you, if you're off, someone else in your office can take care of that?
Yeah, so all of the sites know that if they send that email, really, and at this point now, I'm sort of out of the loop. They're sending it to not only Adam, but to also Stephanie, because Stephanie can put the work orders in as well. And that's the other way that some of the offices do. Gretchen Higgins, typically what they'll do is they'll just put a work order in, and that works as well, because the work orders, it doesn't even have to come from us. It goes right to our technician, and he sees that.
How long is that turnaround to get a change made if they forget?
We can do it pretty quick. I mean, it's really a couple of minutes as long as it's one that we're able to do through the computer. But like and I'll use Tremont as an example. When I get called about Tremont and I'm at home or I'm out of town, right? And this actually happened with Mr. Gabby, I think it was last year. I'm out of town. I cannot access it on a computer. We had no EMS system. I couldn't get it fixed. I couldn't get it overridden. It was an evening. I couldn't get a hold of anybody, and there was nothing I can do, unfortunately. So it's just really, it's so important to have, but that's whether we had these set points or not, that was already in place. So it's just really stressing how important the communication piece is.
For those schools that have the 1 hour override switches, does the computerized monitoring system we have show each classroom?
It does.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm looking at for thermostats as well is actually changing all of the thermostats district-wide. And those thermostats actually go onto a cloud. And some of them are as simple, some of them are as cheap as like $1 per month per thermostat. And what that allows me to do is it's referred to as a poor man's energy management system, right? Because what it allows me to do is log in and actually access your thermostat and turn your thermostat back on and override it or change the temperature because you've got 60 kids packed into this room getting ready for a play or something like that. So that school districts are in the position that they can't afford to save money a lot of times. Installing an energy management system for HVAC at a campus is typically around $1 million or more. So you want to save the dollars, you just simply can't afford it. So there's several manufacturers, including Emerson and White Rogers, who have actually come out with these poor man's EMS systems, and it's really, really cheap to run them. It doesn't necessarily give you all of the same features as a true EMS system, but what it does is it allows us to gain control of what's happening out there in our spaces.
Are there any board
No, I mean, I would say go for it right away, but I would just say continue. You have to really be good on the communication, and you got to really be good on emergency calls that somebody wants because we're there for whatever didn't get properly planned. I mean, you go back to my original thing: communicate, and keep communicating. I mean, this is a no-brainer. You do it.
Mm-hmm. I think my one thing was, okay, if someone didn't communicate, then it's our kids and the parents, if there's something, and that makes us look really bad. So we need to make sure that does not happen.
Well, I understand that, but I also understand that I'll say this, that there's only so much that I can expect my people to answer the phone. Mm. So if there is a night that they miss their phone, I'm really, really sorry. Sorry, Luke, I'll use you. I'm really sorry that your wife had a warm classroom. I'm terribly sorry about that, especially because you're a board member, right? But that being said, we'll do everything we can, but we can't be expected to be on call 24/7, right? So typically speaking, we answer every call. But will there be ones that will be missed? Absolutely. And the way that's one of those things that I think it's just going to take time. So we've seen this when we decided to take the use of facilities away from schools and bring it in-house. That was my first year here, and that was an absolute nightmare. It was a fiasco, right? And it took some time for people to really get used to it, and now it's a great program. And if you talk to the site principals, for the most part, what you're going to hear on the site secretaries is, thank God I don't have to do that anymore, right? We maintain that in-house. Same thing this was the first year that we took away the keys from all non-12-month employees. And that definitely stirred things up a little bit. And what we've seen is, one, we've seen a lot less, besides for the dollars we've saved, we've seen a lot less energy consumption at the schools, right? We've seen our custodial staff and our M&O staff actually able to complete their tasks. And furthermore, what we've seen is some teachers, and what's being reported to me out of even Gretchen Higgins, is that they're actually saying now to their principal, wow, I am so glad I actually had the summer off. So it's one of those things that, and I'm sorry I digress, I kind of went off, but it's going to take time for people to get used to. We will do everything we can to support it, but we're a small shop, we're a small school district.
Is that why you took the keys away?
We took the keys away for a lot of reasons, and none of it was punishment. But it was really about, one, controlling costs, and two, it was about allowing M&O to do their job. I'll tell you that with all of the ancillary moves that took place this year because of sixth grade moving, and we're talking about even almost every classroom at Tremont, we expected a huge, huge nightmare. And I can tell you that almost all of the movement, with the exception of a few classrooms, is done, and almost every classroom is ready to be released.
When do they get their keys back? And I know
we're releasing keys on July 26th, 2 weeks prior, and we are almost to that point. I mean, we are in a much better place from an M&O perspective right now than we have been, and I attribute that to several things. I attribute that, one, to Adam. Having Adam here who can really monitor it full-time over the summer has been huge, because even in the past I couldn't because of other projects that I worked on. But then just the staff being allowed to work has been tremendous, because in the past we would have other staff members coming on site and really monopolizing the time of the custodians and of maintenance, and let me do this and doing this and walking on waxed floors, etc. So having those schools closed has been really, really good for our staff.
But they will have 2 weeks.
Yes, July 26th, and that's what was put in the memo that Leonie and I worked on, and she did the bulk of the heavy lifting on that, but she released 2 staff prior to the end of school year.
Very good. Okay. Are there any public comments on this?
One thing that wasn't mentioned is the various science projects that go on in the classrooms. In May, if it's 95 degrees in an unoccupied classroom, you have your silkworm caterpillars in your second grade class. I've seen rabbits, I've seen ducks, I've seen aquariums, I've seen all sorts of living things, particularly in the elementary schools. You'll have to think long and hard what, the temperature will be in those unoccupied classrooms during the weekends, particularly in May. Thank you.
So if I may, and Tad, first, thank you, right? Because I didn't talk to it, but as with any adoption of any policy, there are going to be things that we look at differently. So the science classrooms is something that would be considered, but do we need to keep it at 70 in the classroom? I don't think so. Maybe somewhere in the 80 range, but that's something that I would work with our science teachers to find out. And honestly, if I feel like the science teacher is kind of selling me a boat I don't need, I'm going to go and get another opinion on that, because maybe the science teacher just wants it to be 70 in their room. So I would find out, but we would take that. We don't want to see any of the kids' projects destroyed. So.
Or coming into dead animals.
Absolutely. Well, that's what I mean by projects. I definitely don't want to see that.
If we're going to be realistic, some of which shouldn't be there in the first place.
Right,
but,
and that's the other piece to that. This does allow not only the sites to get a little bit better control of their sites, but also the district administration, because we have seen some animals and things in the classrooms that they really weren't supposed to be there. So now if you submit the request because you have a boa constrictor in your room, we may really need to consider whether or not that snake should be there in the first place.
So without any more comments, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the district HVAC set points.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And I as well.
Thank you.
I'm sure Luke is going
Thank
to
you.
run right home and tell his wife.
You never knew you were a marathon runner until
Put on
tonight,
the sweater.
Mr. Cleese. Thank you for all those items. And
As soon as you get home.
Not done.
Yeah.
Safe routes to
oh, you
school.
do. It's a quick one, though.
Yes.
Yes.
This is a really quick one, and it does play into that stewardship of the environment, right? So safe routes to schools is something that we have been involved in for quite some time, and the city works with this with the Solano County Transportation Authority to obtain project funding. We have a partnership with the city, and we continue to work with them and look for ways to improve not only safe routes to school, but also to improve mass transit and so on and so forth. So what we're proposing here is actually a sidewalk modification and adding a pedestrian shelter on College Way, which that part is city property, but then there would be modifications to some very slight modifications to the parking lot, as well as the landscape area in front of the DHS campus in that grass. And that grass, we already have an easement with the city as well as all the utility companies, so we're not necessarily giving up something that they sort of don't already have rights to. And I apologize, this is their picture, not mine, but essentially this here is the southwest corner outside of what was the administration wing when the district office was housed over there. What we're looking at doing is some new painting and striping through the parking lot. They will work on making sure that we meet all grade and slope to be ADA compliant, and we're going to lose probably about 4 parking spots. With that being done, they'll actually take out an area of our grass. They will put concrete there, and then they're actually going to cut back the street for an inlet for the bus to actually stop where it's not blocking traffic. They propose also putting in a bus shelter there, basically to protect our students and anybody else who's using public transportation from the elements. So it's safe and direct access to the bus stop. The bus shelter provides that protection of the elements. It will be ADA compliant. It's minimal disruption and loss of parking, and there's no cost to the district. So ultimately, the reason this is coming to the board, though, is this is a school district piece of property, and what we are proposing to do is, with our partnership with the city, is actually allow the city to make the modifications to that, assuming that they obtain the grant from Solano County Transportation Authority.
When are they going to do this?
Depends on when the grant gets approved.
Well, I think we need to consider when that happens.
Oh, absolutely. And I think Mr. Giramonti can attest to this from when his time was there. I am really, really strict about when construction happens, particularly at that school. That's fine. Would you agree with that? Okay.
Okay. Any other board comments or questions?
Nope.
Any public comments? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Safe Routes to School project.
I'll make the motion.
Is there a
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well.
And with
Thank you
that, I
very
say
much.
thank you.
Marathon.
Mr.
Good night,
Jeremani.
Mr. Cleese. Go home to your son.
You got 6 to do?
So,
This is less than-
we have like 9.
These are all very quick items.
Because even if we do 5 minutes each, we're like.
They're not even
They're
5
not.
minutes each.
Okay.
No.
So we'll start with Williams, which is a fairly standard one for us, especially when there's nothing to explain. This is our quarterly report, and it reflects that we have no complaints. This is an action item.
So moved.
Okay, is there any public comments on this Williams report? Seeing none? No. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes.
Okay, so the next number of items generally are things that we've thrown on consent for you, but we wanted to bring them out into open session simply because they do reflect, what you approved last month with LCAP, and there are some pretty hefty dollars here, and wanted to have the board have any questions or comments as needed to understand them. So we'll start with, let me make sure I have my documents in order here. I'm going to grab my agenda. We'll start with our approval for the Renaissance Learning Agreement. This is one that we had last year. This is it is entirely an online system that we use for elementary schools for testing, literacy testing. Helps us keep track of our data, how effective our programs are being, and is a predictor for where we think kids will be with regard to SBAC, allows teachers to give some intervention as needed for that. It also has Accelerated Reader, which is our motivational reading program for our students. Something our teachers like. Every year we are considered, there are other programs out there. Right now we're using Run Learn, and we'll use it for the next year, but we might consider another program in coming years depending on how or where we are with this one.
Okay, board comments or questions? No? Public comment? None? I'll entertain a motion to approve Renaissance Learning Agreement.
I'll move.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes.
So our next item is the approval of a contract with J. Webb Consulting, Julie Webb Consulting. Julie Webb is actually a consultant that we met through Area 3 Writing Project, which will be a contract later on. And we have found her to be really, really great at working with teachers as they work with students who are in need of intervention. So if you recall, on LCAP, we're investing a lot of money in our reading intervention program. We're starting to see some results, at least on internal data points there, but really feel like we haven't done enough to invest in those programs. So we're investing in some curriculum. That's not what this is, but also some coaching for these teachers. So this will give us 5 days with Julie. Julie has formed a rapport with our teachers already. They're very enthusiastic about her. And I've actually learned a lot from Julie just in my conversations with her as I've learned about elementary ed this year. And she, like I said, I think that rapport piece is really, really important. Our teachers are really excited about working with her. It's not a cheap consulting contract, but one that we were able to work on the price a little bit down with her to make sure that it met our budget. But we like Julie, and she will be the right fit for our schools.
Okay, any questions? Nope, seeing none. Public comments? Nope. Okay, so I entertain a motion to approve the Web Consulting Agreement.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes.
Thank you. So our next is the approval of our IO Education Agreement. This was something that we piloted last year with our elementaries and C.A. Jacobs. We really went with a limited pilot for this. C.A. Jacobs was the one to really run with it. We're excited to move forward all the way, especially in light of sort of what we found during our differentiated assistance work with the county. It's long been a topic of conversation in this district that, one, we don't generate and use data effectively. We are not getting teachers actionable data in a reasonable time frame so that they can actually do work with that. So IO not only allows us in a very user-friendly way to be able to access student data, but also provides us with a tremendous test bank so that teachers can create tests, give tests. It also communicates with our other adoptions so that it's just a much simpler way of doing things. So we're really excited about this. We've also got a training component built into this because we realize that for, especially elementaries and high school, this is something that needs a little bit of build. Again, credit to C.A. Jacobs. They've done some work already on this, and they're much more ready to roll on it. It will kind of be the model for us on this.
Great. Any questions? Any public questions? So I'll entertain a motion to approve the IO education agreement.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. The motion passes.
So Area 3, so next item, approval of Area 3 writing project contract for elementary professional development and coaching. So Area 3 writing project is something that we began last year. We're actually turning down the amount that we're using with elementary next year because of a different professional development push that we're going to be having. We want to make sure that we are just thoughtful about how often we're pulling teachers out of classrooms. So this professional development will actually happen on site with the coaches coming from Area 3 to work with our kids, with our teachers. We found that to be a pretty productive model. Area 3 comes out of UC Davis. The writing project is as a statewide initiative at this point. This is a $45,000 ask, but this is a not to exceed contract. So built into this, we do have some time for our secondary program, which we initiated last year as well. What we have scheduled right now does not approach that $45,000, but we want to be flexible if we need to be to kind of go deeper with this work with these folks. Really an exceptional group. I mentioned actually we kind of are working with Julie out of this. One really nice thing here is Area 3 uses practicing teachers to give professional development. And from a credibility standpoint, that's tremendously powerful for our teachers. So, an example, a kindergarten teacher from a very similar demographic school from the Sacramento area was working with our kindergarten teachers. And when she's able to say, I'm getting my kids to do this and my kids look like yours and come from the same type of school, our teachers can buy into that. If I'm saying that to them, sometimes it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. So, yeah. There we go. So Area 3 writing project contract.
Any questions? Any public questions or comments? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve the Area 3 writing project.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes.
And our final one tonight is one that was also in our LCAP, something that we have funded for many, many years. A very short history on this. Induction used to be known as BITSA when BITSA first started. The origin of BITSA was the profession was bleeding teachers. We'd have teachers come on, and I don't remember what percentage we were out in the first 5 years, but it was a tremendous amount. So the state created this a system called BITSA, Beginning Teacher Support and Assessment, to provide mentorship to teachers so that they could have a productive or be effective in their first years in the classroom. Data over the years has shown this program has been very, very effective in doing that, even though some people think of BITSA as a 4-letter word. The fact of the matter is now it's called induction. The state has stopped paying for this, so now it's up to local districts to do it. We don't have to. We can compel teachers to do it. Teachers have to clear their credentials in an induction program over the course of 5 years. I will tell you, in our area, I'm not familiar with any districts who do not pay for this. From a recruitment standpoint, Sac State, UC Davis, and everyone else in a teacher shortage is training their applicants to ask, do you pay for induction? And we will not get new teachers if we don't approve this sorts of thing. It's also our teachers providing mentorship. It's local. We're in a consortium with Vacaville, Winters, Davis, Woodland. I'm forgetting somebody, but that's okay. Esparto. So that's our group, and it's effective. As a graduate of the program, I can tell you it's an effective program. So there you go.
Questions, comments? Questions, public questions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second? Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as
I'll
well.
abstain.
Motion. Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay. Motion passes. Still passes.
There you go. And for the record, Mr. Cleese was not around to see me push through 5 items that quickly. Thank you.
Longer to get here than it is to talk about this one. I am presenting to you this evening a revised declaration of need. So we brought one to you in June. This just allows us to, in the event we cannot find fully credentialed teachers, which means they have a clear credential. This allows us to make hires of individuals that in an intern program or in some type of process of completing their credential, and again, allowed by the CTC as well. So the change that you'll see in this document is we've added teacher librarian services, because when we brought the last one, we hadn't approved the LCAP. Now we have a librarian approved. So in the event we cannot find a fully qualified one, this allows us to get hire with an emergency permit. And then the last change is limited assignment permits. We increase that from 2 to 4 for single subject for the hiring that we've needed to do both at the middle school and high school level. We do have some that needed a permit, a special permit.
Okay.
They were not done.
Questions or comments? Public questions or comments? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to revise the declaration of need for fully qualified educators. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye as well. Motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm going to cover Kim's item, which is renewal, really, of a contract with the speech pathology group. As you're well aware, we are unable to recruit speech pathologists for the district, despite constant advertising. The shortage is extreme. The amount of money on this contract is also extreme. When you see the dollar amount of $300,000 to $375,000, that just depends on the level of services that are provided. The good news with this item is that we actually have currently insured through the prior arrangements with this group, and then we also use School Steps, another group that provides services, that we are fully staffed with consultants for our speech services. So we know we're able to start the year with all students being able to get all of the speech services that are called for in their IEPs. So this is kind of a maximum dollar figure unless we have to expand the amount of services that we need to provide. So.
Does this include the services being made up from not having speech
Yes.
last year?
Includes all of the minutes that we have to provide for both any that we owe and the upcoming year.
Okay.
Yep.
Any questions or comments? Public questions or comments? Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to approve the contract with the speech pathology group.
I'll move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And aye as well. Motion passes. Okay.
Okay, and two quick items related to board policies and administrative regulations. First read tonight. The first one is the March set of policies and ARs. And there are a total of 14 items included here. 13 of the 14 are based simply on there are new laws or regulations that have been passed or created. And so the policy is being adopted specifically tied into those new laws or regulations. One is a clarification related to existing regulations in Title I program, so a federal program. So nothing controversial. Let's see, did we even have any options here? If we had options or fill in the blanks, they were consistent with the positions or titles already in the policies. So nothing of any kind of choice nature in these at all. I'd be happy to address any questions the board may have on any of those items.
Questions or comments? No? And public questions or comments? No? Okay.
Okay, so very routine. Similarly, the May set, my next item, there are 14 items there. 10 of them are tied into new law. One is a deletion of a policy about arts and crafts supplies and safety. Another is the relocation of those standards into a current piece of policy. There's one federal recommendation and one policy clarification. So again, none of these are new, complicated, controversial, anything of that nature. There are three, I think, on the big list, which shows that we are not addressing them at this time. Those are items which require negotiations to be able to complete. So that's why those ones are excluded. So again, I would take any questions that you have, but among the most routine sets of policies that I've presented to you at any point in time.
Any questions? Okay.
So we'll bring both these back next time for your approval, and at that point are likely to also have the July set, which probably has hit Cecily's inbox when she's been out this week. So.
Agenda items for future meetings. Anyone have? John, do you have anything? Catlin? Luke?
Not sure how exactly to go about this, but some kind of report. I'd like to hear from a communication with the fifth grade camp stakeholder committee as to what's being, I know that was on one of our lists, but
Yeah, it is.
just to make sure that it's not, fundraising is not put off until the last minute, and then, what's the plan on that? And also a plan on how we're going to reach out to the stakeholders about the potential move of Main Prairie.
Yes.
I just don't want those to fall
Both
away.
those are on.
I know they were
yes.
on your.
Yeah, no, there's actually the principals are convening a group. I can't remember the date, but it's early August regarding fifth grade camp. So
Great.
subsequent to that, I think a report will be
Super.
And Mr. Germani did get 2 weeks off. We were going to get a Main Prairie timeline out tonight. I think that was the intent, but he did get to have 2 weeks off, so we'll hit that in.
Did we approve that?
Yeah.
We'll hit that in August.
The one question that I had was about the CA well. I still drive by there and see really dead grass. I really hope that, by the time students are there, that it's green and we don't have any risks of any injuries.
And actually, part of that is a sprinkler issue. I drove by there today, and there's a couple that are just
Broken
spraying
heads?
up.
Okay.
Yeah, not out. So I think part of that's a sprinkler issue.
Okay. Yeah, because with dead spots means holes where kids can fall and get hurt. Okay, upcoming events, August 2nd, board meeting, August 7th, back to school breakfast, August 9th, our first day of school, and August 16th is our second August board meeting. Meeting adjourned.